everybody. I'm Talia Goldstein. I'm an associate professor of applied developmental psychology here at Mason. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about the work that we do in my lab group and how that work in the lab group is associated with this sort of broader field that I'm involved in, which is the psychology of aesthetics, creativity, and the arts. So this is a domain of psychology or a subfield of psychology that traverses social psychology, cognitive psychology, clinical psychology, developmental psychology. Basically, any kind of psychology you can think of has something to say about the psychology of aesthetics, the psychology of creativity, and the psychology of the arts. So what is aesthetics? Aesthetics is your judgment of art, design, beauty, what you find interesting, what you want to engage with, why you want to engage with it, how you want to engage with it. So aesthetic judgment is the difference between the kind of art and posters you want to put in the walls of your bedroom versus the kind of art and posters that somebody else may want to put up in their bedroom that you don't have a taste for, right? Aesthetic judgment is how you think that some buildings are beautiful and other people think that those buildings are ugly, and yet flip-flop, some people think that some brutalist buildings are beautiful, for example, and they're not quite in your wheelhouse. So that's what psychology of aesthetics studies. It's all about what those judgments are, how you make those judgments, why you make those judgments, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm going to talk about today is a little bit in general about the psychology of creativity and how we conceptualize creativity and study creativity from a psychological viewpoint and through a psychological lens. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about research that I've done personally looking at psychology of the arts and specifically psychology of theater. So starting from there, just a little bit about me and how I ended up in this career where I study psychology of aesthetics, creativity, and the arts. So I was a giant drama nerd growing up, did all the plays, did all the theater, took all the acting classes. I was also a competitive gymnast and dancer, so lots of movement, lots of aesthetic performance, and that kind of thing. When it came time to go to college, I really wanted to go to a conservatory. I really wanted to major in theater. I really wanted to do dance and art for a living, and my parents said, absolutely not. And so what I did was I went to Cornell, and I double majored in psychology and theater, because to my mind, they're basically the same thing. Theater is the study of why humans do what they do, what motivates them, and what causes emotions in humans, then performed on stage for an audience. Psychology is the study of humans and why they do what they do and the emotions that they feel and how they engage in behavior, studied from a scientific lens. So it's two different ways of looking at the same question, which is what is a human and why does that human behave in the way that they behave? So psychology and theater to me seemed like a natural pairing, and so those were the two things that I majored in. Then once I graduated from college, I moved to New York City and tried to make it as an actor and a dancer and a singer, doing Broadway auditions and movie calls. I went out on some small-scale national tours doing musical theater. I did some indie films. I'm an extra in some bigger films. And after a few years, I frankly got pretty sick of it, mainly because I didn't like being a waitress and a nanny and a temp and the check-in person at the gym and all of the other jobs that you have to do in order to try and be a professional artist in New York City. So then I decided to go to graduate school and to study the psychology of the arts. So I was lucky enough to end up at Boston College, where I worked with an advisor named Ellen Winner, who has been sort of one of the leading theorists and researchers in psychology of the visual arts for the last 30 years. She's written a book called How Art Works, which is basically an exploration of the psychology of the visual arts across all of the different ways that you can think about it. She also is an expert in gifted children and prodigies. A prodigy is any child that has an adult level of competency in a particular domain before the age of 10. So think chess prodigies, violin prodigies, piano prodigies, that kind of thing. So this combination of prodigies and gifted children, together with the psychology of the arts, enabled me to think about the psychology of theater and development and child development. And the way that I came to this topic was that I was sitting in my first year graduate seminar on developmental psychology, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to study exactly or what it was that I wanted to do research on. And we started learning about the concept of empathy from a psychology perspective, right? So empathy is the understanding of somebody else's emotions and somebody else's mental states, and then the ability to regulate your own emotions and know your own mental states to match them, right? And to connect with them. Who in here has acting training or theater training? A few of you. What does empathy sound like? You have to understand somebody else's mental states, emotional states, and then you have to regulate yourself in order to match them. Sounds pretty much like acting, right? Sounds pretty much like creating a character. That's what I thought while sitting in my first year graduate seminar. And so I said, great, I'll write my final paper, because in graduate seminars, your final paper is often a 20-page literature review. So I said, cool, I'll go write my 20-page literature review on everything that's ever been done on the psychology of theater and acting. So I'm doing my Google searches, I'm doing my psych info searches. I'm old enough where I was going to the library and literally like flipping through books. And it turns out there was nothing there. There was nothing. There was no empirical or experimental research on the psychology of theater and empathy. And so that started me on my research career. That's how I started doing the studies that I continue to do today with my lab group. Now, as I was starting to do this research, I realized that the other side of the coin was also missing. The other side of the coin is, how does an audience member understand an actor, right? Because an actor is a weird thing. An actor is a real live person embodied in the flesh, standing in front of you, pretending and lying, but doing it in a way that is supposedly realistic enough to cause an emotional response in the audience. So who in here has watched a television show in the last 24 hours? Who in here has watched a film in the last week? Great. All of you engage with acting all the time, right? Even if you don't think about it that way. Even reality TV, they're still acting. They're not acting very well, but they're still acting, right? So we all engage with acting as audience members all the time, and theater is something that when people are involved in it as actors, they get really, really passionate about it. So I wanted to study both sides of the coin, right? Both what happens to actors when they're acting, but then also how do audience members understand the actors that they're seeing on stage. So that led me to my postdoc at Yale with a faculty member named Paul Bloom, who has written about and studied the psychology of the mind for a really long time. And Paul is particularly interested in questions about reality versus fantasy. He's particularly interested in questions about why we like the things we like and why we put ourselves through experiences that we may not actually find pleasurable, and yet we still want to do them. So things like going to watch a horror film that makes you scared. Why is that something that human beings want to do, even though if I came at you with like an actual knife, or if I asked you to spend a night in an actual haunted house where you knew you were going to get harmed, you'd sort of be a fool to do it, right? But we enjoy these experiences when we watch other people portray them on screen. Similarly, we enjoy doing things like eating really spicy peppers or riding on really scary roller coasters, right? This is a phenomenon known as benign masochism, where you're engaging in masochistic behavior because you're harming yourself, but it's benign because you're only doing it a little bit. So what I did in my postdoc was to study how kids understand these various phenomena of portraying characters and pretending and lying when they're on stage. After that, I started a first faculty position in New York City, and then 6 years ago, I moved here to Mason and started my research lab, which is called the Social Skills, Imagination, and Theater Lab. And the name really encompasses everything that we do. I'm particularly interested in the social aspects of all of these different phenomena. So how do we think about the people who portray the characters on screen and on stage? And then also, how do the people portraying those characters, the actors, understand, learn about, and imagine themselves to be part of those roles and part of those emotions while they're on stage. My lab right now is quite large. We've got a bunch of graduate students, and we're really engaging in research across the variety of phenomena for social skills, theater, and imagination. So I have a graduate student who's working on video games, and particularly how engaging with video games can help children's creativity, as well as how do children judge the creativity of other people playing video games. So does anyone in here play Pokemon Snap? It's where you're riding a roller coaster and you get to take pictures of the world as you ride the roller coaster around. Those pictures get rated on creativity. So my student is very interested in how those ratings come to be and what kids think about those ratings. Has anyone ever played Minecraft? Great. So she's also really interested in what is considered creative within Minecraft, and if you approach Minecraft with the goal of being creative rather than the goal of just, beating zombies, what are the differences in the ways in which you cognitively approach that game? So those are our video game questions. My lab has also done research on the marching arts, including marching band, drum corps, and color guard, looking at how those kinds of artistic experiences can build a sense of belongingness and a sense of self-efficacy in the college students who engage in those kinds of activities. I also have a whole productive line of research on Santa Claus. I apologize for the spoiler that I'm about to give you, but what I'm particularly interested in is how do kids make the transition from believing in Santa Claus to understanding that he's not real. I know, it's very disappointing. What I want to know is how do kids use their burgeoning cognitive skills, such as scientific reasoning and understanding of the social world, in order to gain skepticism and eventually come to disbelief. I started this line of research because Santa Claus is this really interesting case of children interacting with actors in improv live. Because many, many, many parents in the United States take their children to visit Santa Claus at the mall, and that guy is an actor standing in front of you in his beard and his belly. I'm also very interested in what I'm calling theatrical thinking, and I'm about to finish writing a book on this, in which I'm looking at what are the various habits of mind, problem-solving strategies, and thinking strategies that teenagers, adolescents engage in when they are learning how to act. So things like committing to choices, making decisions, being flexible, understanding your body, reflecting and metacogniting on the types of activities that you recently engaged in. All of those things are taught in acting classes, and I'm particularly interested in how they're taught and how the students are learning from them. So that's just like a little smattering of the kind of work we're doing in my lab. I also teach. I teach the course Psychology of Creativity and Innovation, in which we engage in an experiential learning of the creative process and how that can be applied to our everyday lives. So for example, today at 3 o'clock, I'm going to be teaching on the psychology of dance. What we're doing today is we're going to make up our own TikTok dance. Then we're also going to learn somebody else's TikTok dance. And we're going to look at the psychological differences between creating something on your own versus interpreting somebody else's creation. We also listened to a podcast where two famous choreographers, Twyla Tharp and Justin Peck, talked about their creative process of choreography and how they interpreted other people's movements. So we're going to relate that back to our own experience. So that's Psychology of Creativity and Innovation. I also teach developmental psychology because I'm a developmental psychologist, and then I teach graduate courses in emotion, play, and development. So in this way, I'm able to integrate these different fields of aesthetics, creativity, and the arts across a variety of different psychological sub-disciplines. I'm not the only one. There are several different sort of larger group structures that are engaged in psychology of creativity and the arts. So, for example, at Mason, we have the Mason Arts Research Center. It's a National Endowment for the Arts national lab. And what we do there is we have a conference every other year in the Center for Fine Arts to talk about arts research across a variety of different fields. So psychology, education, economics, community psychology, participatory action research, those kinds of things. We also have partnerships with policy organizations such as the Education Commission for the states that helps decide education policy for K through 12 education across the US, and public-facing organizations. including things like the Mason Community Arts Academy, the Kennedy Center, and Imagination Stage. Then I'm also part of this larger group that's an international community of researchers who study aesthetics, creativity, and the arts. It is very helpfully named the Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts. We call it PACA for short. We have a journal that comes out every other month, so 6 times a year. And we are part of APA Division 10. So APA is the American Psychological Association. It's the largest professional organization of psychologists in the world. It's called American, but it really is an international organization. It is made up of a bunch of different divisions, almost 100 at this point, and Division 10 is Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts. It's pretty cheap to join. You can join Division 10 for $25 a year, and you get access to the journal, which is this, one of these sample issues there, and then you also hear about books, like this Cambridge Handbook for the Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts. There's also an annual meeting of the American Psychological Association. It's like 20,000 psychologists from around the world coming together to talk about every form of psychology you can think of. It meets in DC every 3 years. This year, summer of 2023, in August, it'll be meeting in DC from August 3 to 5. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend you attend. It's quite thrilling to be around like that many psychologists with every topic you can think to study.